Getting too much spam and want to better protect your personal data? Then try Incogni and get a 60% discount on an annual subscription when you use offer code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup. Click below to get started or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. Mafia The Old Country. I'm going to say right off the jump that I like this despite all of the things I'm about to talk about in this video. I think I'll start with probably my hottest take first. I think this can only be called a video game in the strictest sense of the term. And in trying to sell this to anyone, I'd actually position it as like a 10-hour cutscene with some light interactive elements rather than an actual video game. That's a pretty hefty shot across the bow when talking about a game, so I will again reiterate that I like this quite a bit actually. I have a fair amount of affection for Mafia The Old Country, but I can't recall ever reviewing a game that was so light on gameplay as this one was. You might be saying, oh, but what about Sable or Limbo or a Telltale game or Gone Home or whatever? Surely those are less playable, right? I mean, yeah, in a way, but each of those experiences set up a framework where the degree of playability offered to the player feels right given the overall experience. In Limbo, I didn't go into it thinking I'd be triple jumping or doing complex traversal puzzles, and in Gone Home, it's not like I was thinking to myself, man, this would be so much cooler if I had a shotgun and I was shooting demons or some shit. But Mafia The Old Country, as you watch gameplay of it here, you're probably imagining a vastly more sophisticated gameplay experience than what this actually is. You're seeing this beautiful, expansive Sicilian countryside, and you're probably imagining all of the places you could explore and the side content you could do. You're seeing the stealth sandbox, and you're probably imagining how that might evolve with new techniques or scenario design. You're seeing shootouts and knife fights, and you're probably imagining that new weapons, enemy types, and character progression could mirror the growth of the protagonist, Enzo, as he climbs the ladder from brawling upstart to trusted family associate. But none of that stuff is here, man, like absolutely none of it, to the point where in a Mafia game, a game about criminal thugs, there's no melee combat. Like, you can't just throw a punch at someone, it's either knife fighting or nothing. Seems kind of weird for something as basic as melee combat to be completely omitted from this sort of experience. There are some really great things about Mafia The Old Country that I thoroughly enjoyed and that I'll remember it for, but I think the thing I'll remember it for most is the gaping chasm between all of the gameplay elements that this game gestures towards versus what it actually delivers. I can't think of a game where the gulf has been so wide, and it's truly a testament to this game's writers, artists, and performers that this thing manages to come together at all, because were it not for those things, this game would be like a 3 out of 10 Golem level Cataclysm. Okay, not that bad, but it would have been very bad because yeah, the gameplay side of this is just incredibly weak. Now at this point you might be thinking to yourself, weren't previous Mafia games kind of like that too? Well yeah, but Mafia 1 came out 23 years ago. Back then games were very often much simpler in their construction. It was impressive when a game could offer a semi-open world that you could drive around and some half-decent third-person shooting and an adult storyline. Those were big achievements 23 years ago, but think of how far this narrative-led third-person action genre has come in that time. Uncharted and Mass Effect and GTA and Red Dead. Hell, Sony basically won the console war off the back of third-person, semi-open world, narrative-led action games, many of which starred various sad dads. Whether it's linear, mission-based, semi-open world, fully open world, no matter which subcategory you choose, this genre has made massive strides over the last 23 years, and Mafia The Old Country reflects absolutely none of that modernity. But this is where we get to my other hot take. At 10 hours long, and with some extraordinarily bare-bones gameplay, the brevity and simplicity of this game makes it feel like a time capsule exhumed from a bygone era, and that is strangely comforting in 2025. The narrative third-person action game has advanced considerably in 2 decades, and you could argue that in some aspects, they've advanced too much. Like, did The Last of Us Part 2 need to be 25 hours long? Did Days Gone need to be 40? Did Red Dead 2 need to be 60? Do games like the modern Assassin's Creed games or the Horizon series really need to have maps that big with that many things to do? Does God of War Ragnarok really need to have that many gear sets and skill trees? Was every single one of them essential? For many people, the answer to all of those questions is yes. They want big, complex games. When they slap down that cash, they want to get something very meaty in return, and you know what? I get it. That's totally fair. I'm going to tell you right now though, Mafia The Old Country is absolutely not the game for you. But there are going to be some people, a not insignificant number I suspect, that answer no to those questions, and they yearn for something smaller, simpler, something that dispenses with all of that modern guff, something that asks very little of you, but that does offer a fair amount in return if storytelling and characters and presentation are what you go to games for. If you're one of those people, then I got news for you. Mafia The Old Country was made just for you. It's easily disregarded as antiquated and overpriced. It's easily hand-waved away on account of its anemic and simplistic gameplay, and it's an interesting case study in how little gameplay you can deliver while still being called a video game. But the bottom line is that Mafia The Old Country is well written and well acted and transportive and earnest. I'll put it this way, I've played a lot of games that had a lot more going on, but felt like they accomplished far less than what Mafia The Old Country was able to do with its singular focus on characters, storytelling, and setting.
Kill me, you start a war.
Things have been different since you showed up.
Have some fun once in a while.
Do you wish to commit yourself, your life, to this family?
Mafia The Old Country is a completely standalone story in the Mafia franchise. You definitely don't need to have played any of the previous games before stepping into it. It's a new cast of characters, but more importantly, a new setting and a new time period. The Old Country takes us back to where this thing of ours first began, early 20th century Sicily, an island girt by sea and far from the central governing forces of Italy. It was here that the local population could not rely on the law to settle their disputes or guarantee their protection from ne'er-do-wells. And so a network of clans or families emerged, each ruling over a fiefdom for which they were the protectors of sorts. Your average person growing olives might not have need of protection, but if there was a rival grower who might try to poison your crops, you couldn't turn to the law for help because they were simply too inept to do anything about it. It was your local don to whom you could turn, and with his men of honor, he could guarantee the safety of your enterprise, just so long as he could dip his beak in every once in a while. The setting for Mafia The Old Country is fantastic. It's great to play a Mafia game set in old Sicily. However, I do think that the time period they've chosen here is a bit of a missed opportunity. By the turn of the 20th century, the Cosa Nostra was already an established part of Sicilian culture, and in rendering that place and time, Mafia The Old Country never offers up anything new or different beyond what you've already seen or what you might be able to imagine. It actually would have been fascinating to have set this game 50 years earlier, because that would have been the origin story of the Mafia itself, and that's a story that has never really been told by any popular game or movie. If Mafia The Old Country wasn't going to explore an unexplored time, it might have been helpful to have told an untold story, but it certainly doesn't do that either. This is a very, very by-the-numbers affair. If you've seen basically any Mafia movie, you've already got a pretty clear sense of what to expect here. It's men in waistcoats with rifles slung over their shoulders, it's tile-roofed villas and vineyards, it's men swearing oaths and dishing up violence and charm in equal measure. There's a Don, he has men he trusts and men he hates. He has a daughter and she's off limits, so it'd be a real shame were she to fall in love with the wrong man. Enter Enzo, the protagonist of our story. Enzo is an unlucky wretch who grew up working as a slave in the mines, quietly harboring the dream of going to America to start a better life. On the eve of that journey though, tragedy struck, but by pure luck, Enzo falls into the service of Don Teresi, a hard man but ultimately a fair one. He's more Corleone than Soprano, and with the help of his right-hand man Luca, they gradually induct Enzo into their clandestine way of doing business. What unfolds is, as I said, a very by-the-numbers story, but ultimately a pleasant one. We all love a good origin story, we all love a good mafia story, we love a good romance, especially one involving star-crossed lovers. We love a bit of action, a bit of betrayal, a rivalry that plays out over 3 acts. Mafia The Old Country has got it all, and I mean that affectionately, though I think it could also be used as a criticism of the game. You have seen all of this before, especially if you're an enjoyer of Mafia media. It's told in a fairly straight-laced way without much variation. Put it this way, if I asked you to guess the plot of this game based upon this cover image, you would probably guess about 70% of the plot. It is said that there are only 7 plots in all of fiction, and Mafia The Old Country is definitely at least 3 of them, but that doesn't make it bad because it's actually pretty well told. Cornerstone is a cast of characters that are fantastic. They are each of them distinct and nuanced and believable. They just feel incredibly authentic, and as someone who plays far too many video games and has to suffer through far too many horrific video game characters, I'd actually put Mafia The Old Country's characters at the upper end of the quality spectrum. Enzo in particular is the perfect balance of a playable protagonist who is a vessel for the player's fantasy and an authored character with a predetermined personality and fate. His mentor Luca is a standout, gently pulling Enzo into this world through test and observation. The way he would impart a lesson and then scan Enzo for his reaction really sold how a man like this might evaluate a newly arrived prospect. Don Teresi is another standout, a fierce, intimidating patriarch, but there's an air of elegance and emotional depth to him that makes him feel like an actual father figure rather than just a mob boss. There are quite a few other strong character performances here, to be honest, too many to list in fact. having rolled credits on The Old Country, the plot left little impression on me, but these characters did. I really enjoyed spending time with them, and they were able to elevate what was an otherwise fairly predictable mafioso tale. The writers were obviously hugely important in bringing these characters to life, but I also really want to give credit to the performers and technical teams too. All of the voice work here is fantastic. It's mostly authentic Italian accents, and the line delivery is always on point. I was absolutely pulled into the drama of this tale, and I could feel the joy, anger, anguish, and betrayal in these characters' voices as these events unfolded. And I could see it in their faces too, and this is where credit goes to the technical teams behind all of this. This is a game that is primarily cutscenes, both pre-rendered and in-game, and the pre-rendered ones were obviously fully motion capped because they look fantastic. This is a game where things are left unsaid, and where a character's eyes and their expression does the talking. It doesn't happen on its own. It takes a huge amount of work from developers to convey all of this emotion in a way that feels true to film or television. It's done so convincingly and so consistently that the gap between the quality of the cutscenes and the quality of the gameplay becomes gigantic. This really is a game of two parts. One part, a well-written story filled with memorable characters brilliantly brought to life through cutting-edge technology, and the other part, a really crappy video game with gameplay that feels about as old as Sicily itself. Okay, so I think the gameplay of Mafia The Old Country is best summarized by this clip. Roll it, Austin.
No, have you? I came. Huh? Over there. What is that?
Okay, so imagine doing this for 10 hours. I'm kind of exaggerating since there certainly isn't 10 hours of actual gameplay here. If I was to guess, I'd say there's maybe 5 hours tops. The other half of the game is cutscenes, but yeah, what you saw there is a fairly big chunk of what you'll be doing in those 5 hours. And I really wasn't cherry picking that moment, by the way. The gameplay really is that bad the whole way through. Let's talk about the world first though, because when I went into this, I thought that it was a semi-open world game, and by that I mean I knew it wasn't going to be truly open world, but I knew it was set in a version of old Sicily that I could explore to some degree, and I thought that at a few points in the game, it might let me loose to explore a little, maybe do a few side quests, etc. And I was certainly encouraged to think all of that by the opening hours of the game, where you can open a big world map. There's a shop on it that you think you can visit anytime you like. We'll come back to that. There's an option to buy different cars and horses, which presumably means you'd be able to select them before you head out to either a mission or for some freeform exploration. We'll come back to that too. There's a character upgrade system, which is based on collectibles, which suggests that these items would be collected through either exploration or side content. The list goes on. You really do get the impression that you're about to step into a small but explorable Sicily. And I was keen for that because I love when games offer small, curated, semi-open world spaces. 9 times out of 10, they're better than big open world alternatives. Less pointless travel time, less repetitiveness, less bloat. So yeah, I was very ready for what I thought Mafia The Old Country was about to serve up. This is the moment that we get back to the stuff that I was talking about in the intro, the gap between what this game gestures towards and what it actually is. The map of Sicily that you're seeing here, imagine every town or outpost you visit being totally devoid of people except during scripted missions. The shop that I mentioned earlier, imagine only being able to visit there like once, maybe twice during the entire 10-hour game. The cars and horses that you purchase, imagine not being able to select them at the start of most missions, since 9 times out of 10, a specific horse or car is provided to you. Most importantly, don't imagine that you can just go out and explore this world as you see fit, because not only is there absolutely nothing to discover out there, but the game will also literally stop you from exploring since you're always in a mission, and if you stray too far from your objective, the game will often force you back or its mission failed. This was the biggest surprise to me in my playthrough. There are precisely 0 moments in this 10-hour experience where the game says to you, go chill out for a bit. There are 0 invitations to explore Sicily because Sicily was not designed to be explored. It looks beautiful, but beyond its visuals, there's absolutely nothing to it, and that realization came slowly, but when it finally set in, it was pretty disappointing. Still, I'd have happily looked past all of that if the core gameplay held up. but it absolutely does not. The best way to describe it is, like, imagine a Red Dead Redemption 2 mission without any of the supporting open world game systems. So imagine that you just had to ride a horse somewhere and absolutely nothing happened along the way, and then you get to the location and you just have to do some basic ass stealth takedowns or cover-based shooting for a few minutes, and then you ride your horse out of there. That is honestly the entire gameplay loop. The stealth is terrible. The enemies are incredibly dumb and easy to dupe. The stealth sandbox doesn't offer you any options other than just, coin tossing to make a noise. Every area is conveniently littered with these empty human-sized boxes so you can stash the bodies of guards you take down. And I was doing that until I eventually realized that the guards are so spread out and their patrol paths never actually overlap, so you really don't need to use these boxes at all. The shooting combat is equally lackluster. It's just shooting in old school Uncharted 1 style levels. You know, the ones where there's big concrete blocks or kegs or piles of sandbags out in the middle of nowhere for no reason at all. You walk into a new area and the level design tips its hand so egregiously that you're immediately like, well, I'm about to get ambushed. Sure enough, guards start pouring out seconds later. The controls are also just terrible. Like, there's so much auto aim on controller and it's so inconsistent to try to actually aim that the best thing you can do is just let the game aim for you by using the left trigger to automatically center on your targets. 2 body shots with a rifle and they're dead. Onto the next target. The one innovation that Mafia The Old Country tries to deliver is knife fights, but these are also bad. Thematically, they actually work quite well. They're basically like sword fights, and they allow Enzo to get right up in the grill of his foes in climactic showdowns. In a period piece like this, the clash of steel blades feels very fitting, so I think Hangar 13 had the right idea when they went down this path. The execution, though, not good. It's so sloppy and slidey and janky, and the best thing you can do is just wait for them to strike so you can parry them for free damage. Every fight plays out in exactly the same way, zero variation from the first encounter to the last. Worst of all, every knife fight is punctuated by one of those moments where even though you're winning, a cutscene will play that depicts you losing. It's annoying the first time it happens, but then it happens like 10 times after that. It's infuriating. And that really is it. I mean, look, there's a mission with a horse race and another mission with a car race, but every other mission is just ride or drive to a place, do some janky stealth, some basic shootouts, a knife fight with a boss at the end, ride home and watch a cutscene. That's it for 10 hours. But here's the thing, right? Sometimes with these sorts of games with very limited game design elements, developers will try to jack the difficulty to give the illusion of challenge or to take up more of your time, etc. I think something like Star Wars Outlaws is a good example of that, actually, where the reliance on instant fail stealth sections felt like padding to mask some very deep shortcomings in the game design. Mafia The Old Country does have instant fail stealth missions, but the enemies are so dumb and so blind that you basically need to stand out in the open dancing in front of them for them to spot you. Same goes for the shooting. It's all so easy that it's basically impossible to die. The car and the horse races are even better examples, since both of those are scripted such that the race leader will basically stop just before the finish line to allow you to pass. The point is, sometimes games like this try to compensate for their shortcomings by making you replay sections. That always ends up being terrible. Here, Hangar 13 knew they hadn't made much of a video game, and so they don't make you suffer through much of it. They go out of their way to grease the wheels, to clear the tracks. They put their thumb on the scales in almost every instance, and the result is a gameplay experience that's almost more like a pacing mechanism than actual gameplay. For some, that's a deal breaker, and fair enough. If you want your games to be playable, Mafia The Old Country is not at all for you. But if you're not as hung up on that stuff, and you're the type of person who's happy just to coast through a well-told story punctuated by the odd shootout or car chase, Mafia The Old Country is going to make you pretty happy. And I can say that because it actually made me happy, and it's sitting at 71% mostly positive on Steam with over 7,500 reviews counted. Here's the thing, the process of recommending a game in a review is a little trickier than you might think because games are not free. They cost time or money, and everyone values their time or money differently. Mafia The Old Country is $50 right now, and it's 5 hours of really great cutscenes and 5 hours of really not great gameplay. And so the question becomes, how much is that worth to you, or to me, or to someone else? I hope that at this point you can weigh up the pros and cons yourself about whether or not this experience is something that you might enjoy, or how much this experience might be worth to you in terms of dollars. For me though, I enjoyed this, warts and all. Despite how simplistic its world design was, I did enjoy looking at it. Despite how basic its gameplay is, I was never frustrated by it. At 10 hours, it's short by modern standards, but it never feels bloated or poorly paced. Its plot is fairly derivative and paint by numbers, but its characters and performances are tremendously endearing, and I admired how lovingly each member of the cast was written, acted, and brought to life. In an era when so many games try to accomplish so much with bloated worlds and non-linear narratives and elaborate skill trees that don't amount to much and massive exhausting runtimes, it can be nice to play something that just feels like a bit of a chaser to all of that. Like old Sicily itself, it's not the future, it's a taste of the past, a simpler time that still has about it a certain appeal and charm. If you're looking for that sort of trip back through time, and you can go in with the right expectations, and you can get this one at a price point that feels right to you, I think you might enjoy yourself. I certainly did, and that's why I sort of recommend it to you. Your personal data is probably floating around in more places than you think, and trying to reclaim it is really tricky, but it's made a lot easier thanks to this video's sponsor, Incogni. Sure, we know big corporations like Apple and Google have our data because we hand it over to them, but what you probably don't know is that hundreds of other companies that you've never heard of also have your data because it's been on-sold by various data brokers. These companies can then on-sell your data to other companies, spammers, or worse, malicious actors looking to use your personal data to commit identity theft. Now, the loophole here is that you can technically contact these companies and ask them to delete your data, but not only do you not know who has your data, but there are so many of these data brokers that it would be impossible for you to contact all of them. That's where Incogni comes in. You sign up, you enter your details, you grant it the required permissions, and after that, Incogni does all the work for you, sending out hundreds of automated requests to reclaim your data. Take me, for example. Incogni has sent out over 147 requests on my behalf, which has resulted in my data being removed from 138 data brokers. 138! I had absolutely no idea that 138 data brokers even had my data, and now thankfully they don't, thanks to Incogni. If I was to have submitted all those requests myself, doing all the paperwork and the back and forth, it would have taken me around 103 hours, making Incogni incredibly well priced given how much value it delivers. I've absolutely noticed a significant reduction in the amount of spam emails and texts I've been getting, and it just feels nice to know that my data is more secure since no one wants their personal information being held by some company that you didn't even know existed. It's super easy, super effective, and best of all, super affordable. You can use code SKILLUP at incogni.com/skillup to get 60% off an annual subscription. Take your personal data back and get a 60% discount while doing it by visiting incogni.com/skillup and using offer code SKILLUP at checkout. Thanks Incogni for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.